You would have assumed I was the quiet wife in a perfect marriage. I lived in a mansion most people only saw in magazines, shared dinners under a chandelier taller than I was, and tried my best to please a mother-in-law who never truly accepted me. People looked at me and believed I had everything. But the truth is this: a woman can live in a palace and still feel invisible inside her own home. The moment everything changed began with a single photograph. It arrived on my phone late on a Wednesday afternoon. At first glance it looked like a simple snapshot taken inside a luxury boutique. But when I zoomed in, my world stopped in place. There was my husband Chase Walker standing close to a young woman with long dark hair. She was leaning into him as if she belonged there. His hand rested on her back. The kind of touch he had not given me in months. The kind of touch you do not mistake. But the part that broke me was not them. It was the woman sitting across the table from them. My mother-in-law, Vivian Walker, laughing, smiling, reaching across the table to adjust a loose strand of the Mistress hair like she was her own daughter. The caption Renee sent me was short: "You need to see this." I stared at the image, trying to breathe through the pressure building in my chest. What hurt the most was not that they betrayed me behind my back. It was that they did it happily with my money. The same credit cards I paid for, the same lifestyle I worked myself to the bone to provide. In that moment I understood something with painful clarity. There are betrayals you feel in your heart. And there are betrayals you feel in your bones. This one shattered both. Before that photograph arrived, my days inside the Walker mansion followed a quiet rhythm. From the outside it was a dream home, a wide stone driveway framed by oak trees, a fountain that sparkled under the afternoon sun, and rooms decorated with custom furniture that looked more like museum pieces than anything meant to be used. People often said Chase and I were lucky to live there. They never knew I was the one who paid for every brick. Inside that house I moved like a guest instead of a wife. Chase spent most evenings glued to his phone, taking calls he never explained. His mother Vivian drifted through the halls like royalty, issuing orders with the confidence of someone who had never lifted more than a teacup. What neither of them knew was that I bought that mansion before I even married Chase. I paid for the cars parked in the garage. I funded the vacations they bragged about to their friends. Yet inside my own home I was always expected to stay small. Dinner time revealed the truth of our relationships more clearly than anything else. I cooked because Vivian insisted home-cooked meals made a family respectable. She never missed a moment to critique my effort. Too much salt, she would say, too little seasoning, too rustic, too upper market. Nothing ever pleased her. Chase rarely defended me. He would offer a half smile or a quick wink, as if that made up for his silence. It never did. At night I did the dishes alone while the two of them watched television. I scrubbed plates that cost more than my first apartment, thinking this is not what love is supposed to feel like. Some people believe emotional neglect is quiet, that it slips in unnoticed, but when you live with it long enough you begin to feel its weight in every room. Looking back now, the mansion was never a home. It was a stage built from my love and their lies. A place where I played the role of the accommodating wife while they lived off the wealth they assumed was theirs. I just did not know then that everything they stood on was about to crumble. Most people in the Walker family thought I lived a quiet life without ambition. Vivian often introduced me to her friends as someone who enjoyed simple things. She reads, she cooks, she keeps a pleasant home. Chase never corrected her, and I never offered more than a polite smile. It was easier that way. What they did not know was that every morning after preparing breakfast, I drove not to a hobby class or a grocery store, but to the headquarters of Monroe Tech Labs, a glass tower in uptown Charlotte. I would step out of my car and employees would greet me with a respect Vivian never dared show. Because inside that building I was not a wife. I was not someone people dismissed. I was the founder and chief executive officer of a company valued in the billions. 8 years earlier I had started Monroe Tech from a small rented garage with nothing but a laptop, a small loan, and a relentless desire to build something meaningful. My team and I developed robotics software that changed entire industries. Investors lined up. The company grew faster than anyone expected. But at home I kept that identity locked away. Chase once told me he felt overshadowed by successful women. He joked about it, but I heard the truth behind his laughter, so I dimmed my light to keep him comfortable. I let him tell people he managed our finances even though he never contributed a dollar. I let Vivian believe I was lucky to marry into their world when the reality was the opposite. People say secrets protect relationships. In my case, secrecy slowly suffocated mine. Every day I lived two lives. Ariel the CEO, powerful and respected. And Ariel the wife, quiet and endlessly accommodating. I thought I could balance the two. I had no idea how wrong I was. The truth rarely arrives like thunder. In my case, it came quietly, slipping into my awareness little by little, the way a dripping faucet fills a sink. It started with Chase coming home late. He always had a reason: a client dinner, a meeting that ran long, traffic on the interstate. Each excuse felt believable until they began to overlap with something else. The credit card statements. One afternoon in my office at Monroe Tech, while reviewing financial reports, I noticed unusual charges on the card I had given Vivian. She usually spent modestly groceries from specialty markets, a lunch with friends, a hair appointment, but suddenly there were charges from boutiques where a single dress cost more than most monthly salaries, expensive rooftop restaurants, spa treatments I had never heard her mention. At first I brushed it off. Maybe she was treating herself. Maybe she needed something to lift her spirits. That is what I told myself because I did not want to see what was right in front of me. Then the pattern repeated. Every week, same days, same amounts. And always on the nights Chase said he was working late. His phone, once left casually on the counter, never left his hand. He walked away to take calls in hushed tones. He started wearing cologne I had never bought him, smelling faintly of something floral and sweet. Once when I hugged him, I caught a scent that did not belong to me or our home. I wanted to confront him, but every time the words rose in my throat, something pushed them back down. Maybe fear, maybe denial. Then came the call from Renee, my closest friend since college. Her voice trembled slightly. Ari, I do not want to start anything, but I saw Chase at the mall a few days ago. He was not alone. My chest tightened. With who? I am not sure, she said, but the woman was too comfortable with him to be a client. And Ari, Vivian, was with them, laughing. I sat there in silence after the call, staring at nothing, feeling the world tilt. My suspicions were no longer gentle whispers. They were sirens. Something was terribly wrong. And I had no idea that the evidence I needed was already on its way. The photograph arrived on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day that should have passed without consequence. I was finishing a virtual meeting when my phone vibrated. Renee had sent me a message with no explanation, only a short line. I think you need to see this. Attached was a single image taken from across a boutique cafe. At first the picture seemed harmless, but when I zoomed in, my heartbeat shifted into something sharp and uneven. There was Chase, my husband, sitting close enough to a young woman that their shoulders touched. She had long dark hair, a soft smile, and a way of leaning into him that suggested familiarity, not formality. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. His eyes were on her, warm in a way I had not seen directed at me in months. But the part that cut the deepest was the woman sitting across from them. Vivian Walker, my mother-in-law. The same woman who criticized everything I did, from the food I cooked to the clothes I wore. The woman who never offered me a genuine smile. In the photograph she looked transformed, radiant, gentle. She reached out to brush a loose strand of the young woman's hair, a gesture filled with affection. A gesture she had never once given me. On the table were shopping bags from high-end boutiques, bags paid for with my credit card. The dessert they were sharing cost more than an entire week of groceries, and the entire outing was being funded by me. I stared at the image until my vision blurred. I did not cry. The hurt went too deep for tears. Instead, a cold stillness spread through me, a quiet clarity. They were not just betraying me emotionally, they were betraying me financially. They were celebrating on money they assumed would never run out. But everything built on a lie eventually collapses. And that photograph was the moment I decided I would no longer be the one holding it all together. I stayed frozen for almost an hour after seeing the photograph. I did not move. I did not speak. I simply sat there in my office, surrounded by glass walls and the quiet hum of servers, feeling the version of myself that tolerated everything slowly die. When I finally stood up, I was not the same woman who had walked into the office that morning. Something sharp and steady had settled inside me, a strength I had kept dormant for far too long. I walked to my desk, powered on my monitors, and opened the financial dashboards I normally reviewed with calm detachment. But that day, every line of data felt personal. Every number represented a sacrifice. Every transaction was a reminder of how much I had given to people who took me for granted. I picked up my phone and dialed Ms. Dalton, my executive assistant at Monroe Tech. Her voice came through crisp and warm, as always. Ms. Dalton speaking. I need a complete report of all my personal assets, real estate, vehicles, accounts, separate premarital assets from shared ones, and contact our legal team. I want the initial draft for divorce proceedings by tomorrow morning. There was a pause. Yes, Ms. Monroe, I will handle it immediately. One more thing, I added. From this moment on, send me real-time updates for any spending linked to Chase Walker or Vivian Walker. If their cards are used, I want to know. Understood. After ending the call, I opened my desk drawer and took out a leather notebook I rarely used. On the first blank page with a steady hand, I wrote 4 words. Operation Take Back My Crown. Then I called my private banker, Mr. Howard. Mr. Howard, this is Ariel Monroe. I need all additional credit and debit cards connected to my accounts frozen immediately. Mark the reason as security concerns. That includes the cards issued to Chase Walker and Vivian Walker. All of them, Ms. Monroe? Every single one. In 5 minutes the cards will be inactive. Thank you. When I hung up, a quiet satisfaction settled over me. The first move had been made. The pieces were shifting. For years I had carried the weight of that household alone. Now I was finally lifting it off my shoulders and placing it back where it belonged. On theirs. While I spent the morning at Monroe Tech finalizing expansion plans and reviewing legal drafts, Chase and Vivian were living out the first hours of a disaster they could not yet understand. Across town, Vivian had taken Chase's mistress, Lila Hart, to her favorite upscale hotel restaurant. It was the kind of place with white table linens, soft violin music, and prices designed to make average people dizzy. Vivian loved it there because it made her feel important. Lila loved it because she thought she had finally secured her place in a wealthy life. They ordered without looking at the prices: lobster thermidor, imported champagne, a dessert cart that gleamed under glass. Vivian waved her hand dismissively when the waiter asked about the check. Put it on the usual card. But when the waiter returned, his expression had changed. I'm sorry, ma'am. The payment did not go through. Vivian blinked, confused. Run it again. There must be a connection issue. He tried again, and again. The answer never changed. Declined. Chase's mistress shifted uncomfortably in her seat, glancing around as a few heads turned their way. Vivian's cheeks began to flush with a shade of red I knew very well. The shade she used when she was embarrassed but too proud to admit it. Let me use another one, she snapped, handing over her platinum card. Declined. Her debit card. Declined. The restaurant grew quieter as curiosity spread. Lila leaned toward Vivian, whispering sharply. What is happening? You said your son was wealthy. You said money was never an issue. Vivian felt humiliation burn all the way to her ears. She pulled out her phone and called me, her voice shrill with panic. Ariel, what did you do to my cards? At that moment I was in a meeting with my legal team. I looked at her name flashing on the screen, and let it ring twice before answering with a calm voice. It must be a bank issue, Vivian. Try again later. I'm in a meeting. And I hung up. For the first time in her life, Vivian had to sit quietly while someone else paid the bill. And for the first time in my marriage, I felt the smallest spark of justice. By the time I returned home that evening, the mansion felt strangely still, as if the walls themselves sensed what was coming. I set my keys on the table and walked into the living room where Chase and Vivian were already waiting. They had positioned themselves like an interrogation panel, the lights bright, their expressions tight with a mix of anger and humiliation. It was the first time in years they looked at me with urgency instead of entitlement. We need to talk, Chase said, trying and failing to sound authoritative. I placed my briefcase down calmly. About what exactly? Do not play games, Vivian snapped. You are torturing us. All the cards are blocked. The services are not working, and you embarrassed me today. Fix it. Her voice cracked on the last 2 words, the sting of public humiliation still fresh. I tilted my head slightly. Fix what? Vivian, the financial mess you created, or the disrespect you have shown me for years? Vivian's eyes widened. Chase stepped forward. Ariel, enough. You are my wife. You do not get to make decisions like this on your own. A wife supports her husband. That is her role. Something inside me shifted. That old expectation, the one that had kept me silent for years, finally snapped. A wife supports her husband, yes. But tell me, Chase, what exactly have you contributed to support this home? He opened his mouth, then closed it, caught off guard. Before he could recover, Vivian pointed at me sharply. This is my son's house. You live here because we allow it. If you cannot act like a proper wife, you can leave. I let out a small, humorless laugh. Is that so? I reached into my briefcase, pulled out a thick envelope, and placed it on the coffee table. What is that? Chase demanded. Proof, I said simply. Go on, open it! He unfolded the document, his face drained of color. Vivian leaned over to see, and her breath caught. It was the property deed. The mansion, the land, the renovations. All in one name. AIM. Ariel Monroe. The silence that followed was absolute. The kind of silence that only breaks when truth finally settles in and destroys everything built on arrogance. If anyone is leaving this house, Vivian, it will not be me. The morning after the confrontation, the neighborhood woke to an unusual scene. 2 tow trucks rolled slowly up the driveway of the Walker mansion, their engines humming like a warning bell. Chase had just stepped outside, dressed to impress even though he had nowhere important to be. He froze when the drivers approached him with official documents in hand. Good morning, sir. We are here to retrieve the 2 vehicles registered under Monroe Tech Labs, company property. Chase blinked, confused. What are you talking about? These are my cars. The lead driver remained polite but firm. According to our records, both the European sports car and the luxury SUV are assigned vehicles under Monroe Tech. Ownership does not belong to you. We have orders to return them immediately. Before Chase could protest, Vivian burst out the front door dressed in her usual elegance, though her hair was hastily pinned back. She gasped when she saw her beloved SUV hooked to the tow truck. What do you think you are doing? That is my car. I am Vivian Walker. You cannot touch that. But they could, and they did. Neighbors began stepping onto their porches, whispering behind their hands as the spectacle unfolded. Vivian hated nothing more than being the center of attention in the wrong way. Her face flushed a deep shade of red as the tow truck driver continued fastening the straps. I'm sorry, ma'am. This is merely a retrieval of the legitimate owner's property. Legitimate owner? 2 words that struck deeper than she expected. The SUV was lifted first, then the sports car. Vivian shouted. Chase paced in circles. A few neighbors filmed discreetly, but no one stepped in. No one ever steps in when the rich get humbled. By the time the trucks pulled away, all that remained in the driveway was silence and the echo of everything they had taken for granted. But the humiliation did not end there. That same afternoon, the house cleaners left her informing Vivian that their contract had been paused. The cable television went out. The internet slowed to a crawl. Even the grocery delivery service declined the weekly order due to unpaid invoices. For years, Chase and Vivian lived on golden chairs. Now they finally learned what it felt like when those chairs were pulled out from under them. 3 nights after the cars were taken, after the services were cut, and after the last grocery order failed to arrive, the mansion felt colder than ever. Chase and Vivian sat together in the dim living room, surrounded by quiet that no one dared to break. When I finally walked in, neither of them spoke. They simply stared at me with a mixture of fear, confusion, and the last scraps of pride. I stood in front of them, calm and steady. I am here to give you both a choice. Vivian scoffed. A choice from you? Yes, I said, 2 options. Listen carefully. I placed a small key on the coffee table. It made a soft sound that seemed louder than it should have. Option 1. You can leave this house tonight with whatever personal items you can carry. I will not sue you. I will not pursue charges for financial misuse. You will walk away clean, but you will walk away with nothing. Vivian inhaled sharply, outrage rising in her throat. Option 2, I continued. I have rented a small apartment on the east side of town. 3 months' rent is paid. There is basic furniture, a small amount of cash. After that, you will need to support yourselves. Chase stared at the key, as if it weighed 100 pounds. "So that is it," he said quietly. "You are throwing us out." I met his eyes without anger. "No, I am giving you a chance to rebuild yourselves without leaning on me." Vivian shook her head violently. "I will not live in some cheap apartment. I deserve better." Chase did not look at her. For the first time I saw something shift in him, a flicker of understanding or maybe exhaustion. He stepped forward, picked up the key, and closed his hand around it. "We will go." Vivian spun toward him in disbelief. "Chase, you cannot be serious." He did not answer her. He simply lowered his gaze, shoulders sagging under the weight of his choices. That was the night the two of them left the mansion in a taxi, carrying 2 suitcases and more regret than they could ever unpack. Life in the small apartment on the east side of town stripped away whatever pride Chase and Vivian had left. The building was old, the walls thin, and the sound of traffic never stopped. The air smelled faintly of dust and detergent, a far cry from the scented candles Vivian once burned in every room of the mansion. Reality arrived fast and without mercy. The small amount of cash I left lasted barely a week. Vivian, who once hosted brunches for women in pearl necklaces, found herself standing in line at a discount grocery store, counting every dollar twice. She learned quickly that pride does not pay for groceries. Chase faced a different kind of reckoning. He had never held a physically demanding job, but the only place willing to hire him without experience was a warehouse on the outskirts of town. His first day there nearly broke him. Heat pressed down from every direction. Boxes scraped his hands until his palms blistered. His back ached from lifting more weight than he ever had in his life. There were no shortcuts, no special treatment, no name that carried power. At lunch, he sat on a stack of crates between workers who talked about bills, rent, and daycare. Their struggles were real and constant. Listening to them, Chase felt a strange mix of shame and clarity. He began to understand how much of life he had never touched because he had always been lifted by my money. Vivian changed too, though slowly. With no friends willing to return her calls and no income, she turned to the only skill she had ever truly mastered: baking. She began selling pound cakes and sweet potato pies to neighbors. At first she refused to lower her prices, but hunger eventually softened her arrogance. One evening Chase came home exhausted. Vivian had fallen asleep at the table, her apron still on, dough on her hands. For the first time in his life, Chase covered her with a blanket, a small gesture maybe, but a sign that something inside him had finally shifted. Hardship has a way of humbling even the most stubborn hearts, and in that tiny apartment, both mother and son were learning what it meant to start over. A month after Chase and Vivian moved into the small apartment, I knew it was time to close the final chapter. Not with anger, not with triumph, but with clarity. I asked Chase to meet me at a small diner near his warehouse, a humble place with worn booths and the smell of coffee drifting through the air. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting alone in a corner booth. His posture was different now, shoulders lower, eyes quieter, his hands were rougher, the palms marked by days of lifting boxes. He looked up at me, not with entitlement, but with something close to humility. "You look well," I said softly as I sat down. He nodded. "I am fine, working, trying." There was no bitterness in his voice, no defensiveness, just honesty. I placed a folder on the table between us. "This is the divorce agreement. I want you to read it." He opened it slowly. His eyes scanned each page. The terms were straightforward. Assets purchased before our marriage remained mine. I did not ask him for anything. No repayment, no conditions, no punishment, just closure. He exhaled, relief passing through him. "I thought you would make this harder." I shook my head. "I am not here to destroy you, Chase. I just cannot carry a marriage built on lies and betrayal anymore." He closed the folder and pushed it back toward me. "I will sign it. And Ariel, I am sorry. For everything. I know apologies cannot fix what I did, but I needed to say it." For a moment I saw the man he could have been. The man he might still become, far away from me. "I forgive you, Chase. Not for you, for me. I do not want to walk into my future dragging the weight of our past." His eyes softened. "Thank you." He signed his name. A simple signature, yet it felt like the sound of a door closing gently behind us. When I left the diner that day, the sun felt a little warmer. My steps felt lighter. And for the first time in a long time I knew exactly who I was without him. In the months that followed, my life unfolded in ways I had not imagined while trapped in that mansion. Monroe Tech expanded rapidly, and I soon found myself in Singapore, standing inside a new office overlooking a skyline that glittered like a promise. I no longer lived in shadows. I no longer hid my achievements to protect someone else's ego. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to exist fully and unapologetically. My days were filled with purpose again, not just responsibility. I traveled on my own, wandered through museums, learned to paint in the quiet hours of the evening. I made new friends who knew me not as a wife or a daughter-in-law, but as a woman with her own dreams and scars. Sometimes Renee would call and tease me. "Look at you, Ari, a whole new life on the other side of the world." And she was right. It did feel like a second life. Every now and then, Ms. Dalton sent small updates about Chase and Vivian as I had asked her to, just enough for me to know they were managing. They were no longer wealthy, no longer entitled, but they were surviving, growing, learning. Knowing that freed me completely. One evening, standing in front of the wide glass windows of my new office, I watched the city lights flicker like tiny fires. I realized something profound. For years I believed I had to shrink myself to keep a marriage alive. I thought love required sacrifice even when the sacrifice was my own happiness. But betrayal, as painful as it was, shattered the cage I had built around myself. I did not lose everything. I simply regained what I had forgotten. My voice, my strength, my life. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see while living inside that mansion. Sometimes life does not fall apart to punish us. Sometimes it breaks open to show us the truth we were too afraid to face. I spent years dimming my light, folding myself smaller, believing that love meant endurance. But endurance without respect is not love, it is slow erosion. If you are listening to this and something in my story feels familiar, I hope you remember this. You do not owe anyone your silence. You do not owe anyone your worth. And you never have to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. I did not become stronger because of what happened. I simply stopped pretending I was weak. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story spoke to you in any way, I would truly appreciate your support. Like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Your messages help me bring more stories to life. And if you want to hear more journeys of resilience, justice, and rediscovered strength, do not forget to subscribe. Until the next story, take care of your heart, your peace, and the power you carry.